Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 155. Today is Thursday, September 12th. As you're listening on the pod, I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Steve Giswelli. Got a great show, a part 2 show, following up the pitcher standouts. Last week, we've got late season hitter standouts. It's going to be a fantastic rundown, going through a handful of guys that we haven't talked about all that much this year, but we will be talking about all off season for one reason or another. As we discussed, Steve, these tend to be guys who might have gotten scooped up. There's not a whole lot actionable because if you grabbed them, you were riding the wave in the second half of the season and possibly all season for a couple of these guys. But it is going to be a fun time looking at this, Steve. I know you're having a fun time in the home league finals over there, the 2-week run. You're coming up on the end of week 1 here. So sounds like that's all going well. I know I shared with you my extreme melancholy that I lost in the semis. And then in the finals, I went out and went nuclear with like 1,000 OPS and a sub-1 ERA. That's how fantasy works. As one of our loyal listeners, TJ, mentions, fantasy baseball is not for the faint of heart. So Steve, how's it going out there? I'm excited for the show. And I'm excited that you're in the pinnacle of fantasy baseball, which is the home league finals. How you doing, man?
Yeah, it's stressful. We record relatively late on Wednesday nights as we're doing right now. So like going into the week, I was like, all right, Tuesday, I go to bed a little bit early. I wake up relatively early for my day job, and like just I couldn't sleep while 2 of my pitchers were going. On the West Coast on Tuesday night. So like I was up watching Darvish's start and Amanaga's start last night. I've detailed on this show how I am a chronic, MLB at bat and score app watcher and
serial box score checker.
Yeah, I'm a serial box score checker. It is completely at a different level in the playoffs and the finals. It's been a while for me since I was in the finals in my home league since 2019. Have had a bit of a drought there. So it is just so stressful and so intense, and like it's just taken over everything that I do. Honestly, I've missed Fab in NFBC. I'm going to use that as an excuse because my teams weren't that great this year. They definitely could have been better had I paid more attention to them in the second half, and I could have definitely massaged a better standings. Like I'm going to be in like 7th in our listener league. I think I missed the last 2 weeks of Fab. It's so like my professional life, God bless my wife and daughter who have put up with me for all the stress and screaming when my player hits a home run or throwing my phone when a pitcher gives up a home run. But like, this is it. It's so stressful and so amazing at the same time. I imagine this is what like professional athletes feel like in Game 7 of the World Series. It's basically the same thing, right?
Yeah, it did sound like you were going to give kind of like a formal acceptance speech with thanking, the wife, the daughter, and that might be a little preemptive. But yeah, I'm pulling for you, Steve. Of course. Keep the updates coming my way. I know we're not here to dwell on home league, but this time of year, anyone who's listening is down to clown a little bit. How nuts that my home league title switched hands in the final 3
the last 2 at bats, right? Yeah,
there were 3 at bats left, and the guy, both these guys are in the listener league, but Chase and Joe. So Gambino flipped homers and RBIs with a Max Muncy bomb in like the 7th inning, and then a Xander Bogaerts homer in the 8th inning. And it's just like, talk about bad beats. Just imagine having the fantasy title in your grasp and your opponent has 3 at bats left. And just like that, it all changes.
It was the year before I joined my home league. So like 2010. But remember that regular season finish with Evan Longoria hitting the home run, the walk-off?
I remember where I was watching.
That swung our home league final, that home run. It was like 11-2 going into the final day or final weekend.
If I was the team that won, I would have that photo like framed.
Yeah, or like I would get like a Longoria signed card of that moment or something like that. Yeah,
a jersey at the least. at the very
Yeah,
least.
something memorialize that. But yeah, your league ends early, man. You gotta get one more week out of that. I know that we avoid the last week of the regular season too. And we do a 2-week final. So the final started on September 9th and goes to the 22nd, and avoid that last week. But this is early. I was surprised that you guys are done so early.
It's pretty early. We year after year we were, there was just kind of one small thing after the next, or somebody getting kind of shut down. We have like the Pedro rule in effect, where it's a free drop if the manager like openly acknowledges that they're resting somebody for playoffs and everything. And yeah, I think we scooted it up. And then the first year that we had moved it up, there was one or two instances that, looking back, were probably just outliers, because you guys don't bump into that much of the weird stuff, do you?
No, I mean it really happens on the last week, and especially since they don't expand rosters to 40. Now it just expands in
Mm-hmm.
September by 2 guys. There's a lot less shenanigans. Guys go on the IL in September. Where, remember, like, if someone got hurt in September, when there was a 40-man roster, they didn't even bother putting them on the IL because they had the roster availability.
Yeah.
So that's really, and even with extended playoffs, or expanded playoffs, there's a lot more teams in it, so there's not many teams sort of resting guys, right?
Yeah.
You need the bye. And I know there's some certain feelings about the expanded playoffs one way or the other. I'm a bit indifferent to it, but
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a little bit less shenanigans. I still would never want to have
A
a
little bit.
head-to-head week be
Yeah.
determined by that last week. But for roto leagues, and for as long as you do head-to-head leagues, excluding that last week, I think it's totally fine at this point.
Yeah.
With
I think
the rule
ours was a
changes.
little more on like the Dodgeritis of, like, or like when Luis Heel went on the IL, and it's just like, yeah, you're kind of doing some workload management even for the
Mhm.
teams that are in. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's probably worth us taking another look at that. But
Yeah,
to the
I
rundown,
say at least one more week for you guys. Yeah,
that's I'll bring it to the banquet,
yeah,
Steve.
yeah,
I'll put it on
yeah.
there as commissioner.
Maybe I'll
So
have to show up somehow and propose my rule changes for you guys.
hey, I believe me when I say the league is ready for a Steve Giswelli visit, whether it's for our annual road trips, which we didn't do one this year too, but that's too much home league talk.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the rundown, Steve. I know last week we had a little bit of a formula that we were looking at. So here, pretty conventional, but just second half leaderboard is pretty much how we started here, right?
Yeah, it's that custom dashboard I've created, like with process stats for hitters, and I sorted by WRC plus. It's just a quick glance of like who's been the best hitters, and then all of their underlying metrics as far as like strikeout rate, walk rate, swing metrics as far as swing strike, contact percentage, chase rate, in zone swing percentage, hard hit rate, barrel rate, and then some BABIP and batted ball profile as far as line drive, ground ball, fly ball, pull, home run for fly ball, things like that. So basically a snapshot of who's been doing good and what is going on under the hood. And there were some really, really interesting names. And like you said in the start, a lot of guys that we haven't talked about, because like, yeah, these guys are great. Like if you added them, you held on to them, that was it. Like they're not available again. They're usually not available for trade. Like, maybe we talked about them in an ad aspect, and that was kind of it, because once you added them, that was it. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other guys that I think are just going to be very interesting when looking forward to next year. Some rookie performers, some bounce back performers, and some guys that are just hard to define and apply some reason to. So excited to talk about shorter list of names, but get deep into some names like we did with the pitching last week.
Yeah, and per usual, we'll kind of assess how we're feeling about them, at least for first blush, heading into the off season, and of course, draft season 2025, which is crazy to think about, and to think that we're already excited about it, because we're not too far away from flag planting season, where we try to have our own unique stances well before kind of the industry groupthink comes out, and I think some studies show, loose studies, that some of our early impressions in the past have actually been ones we should have stayed with throughout the
Yeah,
offseason.
yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. But to jump in, Steve, we got a bunch of three athletics that turned it on while the team did, and they weren't kind of the typical A's offense that you'd want to stream against necessarily. And the first one being Lawrence Butler, that was a name we talked about, I know, last year, kind of around this time, where we were excited about him in terms of the tools, but it almost felt kind of like Joe Adelian in a way, that like there was, youth is on his side, a lot of kind of pop and raw talent. But I think he came up and made some noise with like a couple homers in his first few games or something. But yeah, last year he finished with a 211 batting average and a 581 OPS. So there was really nothing to see here until what we've seen this year, which has been, I don't want to say a league winner, but certainly a staple for a lot of teams that, probably viewed Lawrence Butler as found money. 268 average, 21 homers, 14 steals, 842 OPS for Butler, and that's been in 111 games. So you look at, like you said, Steve, under the hood type of stuff, and it looks terrific. I mean, 85th percentile on barrel rate, hits the ball extremely hard. I know it's early in kind of making sense of bat speed data, but he passes kind of the eye test on that. And yeah, speaking of the eye test, just some of his homers have been absolute blasts for Butler. So he is sixth on the WRC Plus leaderboard you mentioned since All-Star break. And talk to me about what you're seeing, Steve, under the hood for Lawrence Butler before we get to a couple other athletics that if you're a listener, I'd imagine you're guessing right now because there's only so many A's that are fantasy viable. But yeah, talk to me about Butler, what you like under the hood, or if you've got some doubt on this one.
I'm pretty excited about him. Maybe out of all the A's that we're going to talk about, maybe the one that might be most believable, which is pretty, I think, lofty expectations and maybe a bit of a bold take or hot take considering the year that Rooker had.
Yeah, I do think Rooker, but
yeah. But I mean, the biggest thing with Butler is the fact that he cut his strikeout rate from 30% in the first half to 16% in the second half. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you could see this nice rolling 15-game rolling average with his K percentage just steadily going down throughout the year and his hard hit percentage just climbing or basically, staying around a really good 40% for Lawrence Butler. So it's impressive. There's some power, there's some speed, and props to the A's for like just sticking with it and kind of giving him a chance where, I mean, the fantasy industry wrote him off. I'm sure most other teams wouldn't have given Lawrence Butler as long as a leash that he did, especially in the first half where there was pretty brutal results. But I mean, all of the X stats back it up. It's a 12.7% barrel rate. It's a 49% hard hit rate. That's 91st percentile in the league. The strikeout rate isn't great, but it's passable at 23%. He doesn't chase that much. The whiff percentage is just slightly below average. Like, I think that the only sort of luck metrics that pop up is the fact that the BABIP is still pretty low, right? So I wouldn't know if I would project him for, a 300 batting average, but I think he's like a 260 to 275 hitter. The 20% fly ball homer on the fly ball is slightly high, but for a guy that has a 13% barrel rate, like that's very, very reasonable. So I think that this is probably or maybe going to be a slightly undervalued fantasy asset heading into next year, just because it is the A's. It is a guy that sort of popped up, wasn't a big prospect, had a really slow start, but he's been really good. Like I think, there's been a lot of broadcasts. I don't have the exact numbers up, but there's been comparisons of Brent Rooker, who we'll talk about next, and Lawrence Butler's stats since the All-Star break compared to Judge and Soto's, and like Rooker and Butler's numbers are slightly better.
Yeah, that is insane. I mean, looking at Butler, one thing that jumps out is the 14 steals has not been caught stealing once. So that's something that on one hand is a plus on the success rate, but on the other hand is intent is so important with stolen bases that hopefully this kind of gives him the green light, because just 60th percentile sprint speed, he's a much different player if he's kind of like 25 to 30 homers on a full season with 15 to 20 steals versus like 5 to 10, because like you said, the average is probably in that like 260 zone. But yeah, this feels like somebody that wouldn't be a bad OF2, which is probably where you would have to grab him next year. And I'm interested. I mean, I'm honestly kind of surprised. I know 23% isn't great, but I'm surprised to see that that's 40th percentile, because especially for a power hitter, I feel like anything under 25 is actually a good thing. Only other note is some of the kind of deeper, Christian Mack stat of the IPA over on Pitcher List. He's 17th in the majors on that, which rolls in like the flares and burners, the solid, the barrels as well. So yeah, I think to your point, Steve, there might be quite a bit of value here for people who are just kind of skipping over a name that I think unfairly people would probably chalk up as like a big strikeout guy for what he's done this season in just his second year. And obviously there's going to be a little bit of a discount because of the team he plays for. So yeah, I think that's Lawrence Butler, and I'm interested. I would say my gut on Butler says like B+ on my feeling going into the off season. And if I had to like magic 8-ball it, you think this is kind of like pick 70 to 110 range?
I don't think so. I think that's a little high. I think he's
he'll
like
be
pick
post 100?
100 to like 125.
Okay.
Maybe I'm discounting that a bit, but I don't know.
He's got a popping, all his sliders on Pitcher List and Savant and everything are bright red.
Yeah, they're
and
all good.
He's a 24-year-old with some power
25 homers, 15-ish steals. That might be optimistic or hopeful, I guess.
I'd love him after pick 100.
He may not be there. But I don't know. There's less of a track record. It is just half a season, right?
You're right. Yeah, the first half.
But I mean, he's putting up full season numbers and all of that production essentially is coming from the second half, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's talk about Rooker, his teammate, like you mentioned. I think Rooker is shaped a little bit differently because we saw him break out to some extent last year. It was just the average, which was a 246. The biggest jump this year for Rooker has been the average jumped all the way up to 298. So suddenly you got all this pop with Rooker, and we're supposed to accept that he's like a 300 hitter, which is crazy. But now he's at 35 homers, 8 steals. And yeah, speaking of sliders, everything is bright red on his StatCast page. Now he's kind of in that late power prime. Next year will be age 30 season. So again, it's much different. I will say for Rooker, who's 8th in WRC plus since All-Star break, so just a couple slots behind Butler. When I was kind of looking at a glance, I couldn't see what was changing in terms of hard hit rate, some of the batted ball stuff. And then it was like, oh, the BABIP has gone from 317 last year up to 368. So a massive, massive jump there. And it's, of course, we don't think Rooker's a 300 hitter, but I was still scratching my head of like, is this legit? Because I was just looking for something to point to. Then I saw the poll rate, which was 34% last year, jumped all the way up to 46%, which early in Rooker's career, he had the poll rate, but he did not have the power that he tapped into last year. And then last year he had the pop, but he didn't have the poll rate. So it seems like he's kind of put all of this together to say, okay, we go back to like the Marcus Semien thing. It's like when he does get a hold of it, he knows how to hit homers, dead pull power, and the spray charts completely reflect it. So this was one that I was like very much buying that he's evolving as a hitter because he's tapping into the most of his power, and with it is coming some really good gains for batting average and just how hard he's hitting the ball. So that's my 2 cents on Rooker. He will certainly be pricier than Butler next year because this is year 2 and the overall stats just look a lot more eye-popping. He could end up with 40 homers. Talk to me about Brent Rooker and your outlook, Steve.
The more I look at Brent Rooker, the more I'm excited and in on him. I think there is a market inefficiency for guys that are older, that don't run, that are possibly util only. Like I think Brent Rooker may be
I'll look that
a util only guy next year. He has played
9 in left field, 5 in right field.
Yeah, so he needs to get 20 to have NFBC outfield, or else he's going to be util only, and I doubt he gets that in the last 16 games of the year, right? But I think there's a market inefficiency on these types of guys. Like he is Marcell Ozuna. Like looking at that profile, all the batted ball metrics jump off the page. Sure, there's a lot of swing and miss in it, but he's able to take a walk. He keeps it at the strikeout rate, like, under 30%. Like Ozuna has like gotten that to like 25%, which, he's not going to be a 300 hitter. I don't think Foolish Bailey, who had the meme about, the rendered Las Vegas A's stadium that had, the drawing of the Oakland A's lineup in the outfield on the Jumbotron at Brent Rooker hitting 303. And then like 3 days ago he was like, this rendering looks great, but there's no way Brent Rooker profiles as a 303 hitter. And then on September 15th, he was hitting, or September 5th, he was batting 303, and people were dunking on him. It was hilarious. Shout out to Foolish Baseball, great follow on Twitter and YouTube channel. But I think that there is just a guy who is a lock for a floor of like a 250 average with 30 homer floor, 35 homer floor. And the A's offense is good now, and they're going to be playing in a minor league baseball stadium in Sacramento where it's hot in the summer and not like cold at night like it is every night in Oakland. I think that there's just a bias against these sort of profiles. So I don't know if his cost is going to be truly prohibitive on draft day next year. And I'm hoping to snatch up like, pick 80 Brent Rooker or something like that next year, because I don't see what the flaw, like they act like, yes, the batting average is high this year. The XBA is 278. Like it's, I'm not saying that he's going to have a 278 XBA next year. I think he may have a 260 XBA and a 250 actual batting average, but that's going to come with some of the best power numbers in the league. So I hope to have shares of Brent Rooker next year.
Well, Rooker this season has been more or less like a top 8 outfielder. So I'm wondering, again, kind of crystal ball, it feels like throw a dart and say maybe he's in like the 50s. Now that util is a big factor because in other like Yahoo leagues, he should have OF. And I know there's a big util discount, which we've seen with Ohtani, we've seen with Yordan Alvarez, we've seen with Ozuna. Yep.
So like JD Martinez in his prime, David Ortiz. Like I always, my best hitters were always those sort of guys that were discounted for one reason or another because of their age, because of their position eligibility. And I've kind of gotten away from that recently. Like I feel like I should have been more in on Ozuna this year. I should have been more in on Ohtani. And I think that those, yes, I understand the flaws in it, but I think there's too much of a penalty on it.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think Rooker will probably be somewhere in that, like, I don't know, 45 to 70 pick range, probably like your third batter to anchor your offense. And yeah, I don't see anything that's going to scare me off other than the lineup. But for what it's worth on that, because I feel like we do need to address that he's on the A's. He has 75 runs, but he has 100 RBIs to date. So like the runs are going to be a little bit lower than what obviously he would have in like a top offense for an entire season, but I still feel like that's, very, very passable. And the 8 steals isn't nothing. I mean, we talk about like Ozuna or something, you're not getting 8 there. So whether or not that stays, I know 4 was his high from last year, but yeah, overall it's a really, really promising skill set. All the directions are going in the right direction. And the fact that he's only 29 and not like 34, which is what that prototype usually is.
Yeah.
I think I'm a buy all around on Rooker. The next one, I don't know that I'm a buy on JJ Bleday, Steve. And I had him rostered in my home league. I know you have him on yours as well, unless you dropped him recently. Did you drop him?
Had to drop him. Yeah.
Oh, you had to. Okay.
Or he had a weekend versus 2 or 3 lefties, and then I think they played the Mariners, which is a great pitching staff. So
yeah,
he was just like it was just a situational cut, but I did ride him for a while.
And Bleday is 26th in that post All-Star break WRC Plus leaderboard. So he deserves the attention and to discuss, like, along with Rooker and Butler. Bleday, we look up and now he's at 20 home runs, 244 batting average. He has 71 runs, 56 RBIs. So it's all down quite a bit. But if you look at the second half, which is really what the leaderboard is all about, a 274 average and an 862 OPS for Rooker or for Bleday. And this is just one that, knowing that he has this first half, second half split, I didn't see a ton to point to really. The barrel rate did jump up a little bit from June and July at 7% up to 10% in August and September, which of course kind of gets you over the hump from, a mediocre barrel rate up to what you would say is a good barrel rate. But other than that, it was kind of like you really have to squint to see that Bleday is like breaking out. I think he's showing that he's a solid player, and his name was on everyone's radar for a while. But yeah, I mean, I guess youth is still on his side, 26 years old. He did have some prospect pedigree with Miami, and now we are seeing that he can put together what looks like kind of like a 25 homer season with coming off a good second half. So it's not to say there's nothing exciting, but there's a pretty big step down from the guys we've talked about, where I feel like
we were talking about, at worst top 8 round picks, right? Now we're talking about like end game roster piece, but I think there's a lot to like as for JJ Bleday as like your last outfielder in a 12-team league, your fourth outfielder in a 15-team, 5 outfield league, or third outfielder in a 15-team league. Saris of the Athletic has been, he's feel like JJ Bleday has been on like his sleeper hitter list like every single offseason. You could see on YouTube the barrel percentage over months, so that improvement that you were talking about, but he does a bit of everything well. Like I can see why he is a player that likes, and therefore I like. He doesn't strike out that much. He hits the ball relatively hard. Has a good barrel rate, and you pair that all together, and you get a guy that hits 20 homers in a good offense and is 22% better than league average on the whole as a for the year. And I think that there's some BABIP luck there that may regress. It's just a 274 BABIP, a 10% homer to fly ball, like with a barrel rate
that's low,
at 10% for half of the year. That's pretty low. He doesn't chase, he makes good contact. There's a solid hitter in here, and I think that it may not be the most intriguing or sexy profile just because it's a slash line of 244, 323, 452 on the year. But when you break it down and look at the improvements that he made and the A's made in the second half, I think there's a bit to like here as sort of a guy who you should be targeting in the back end of your outfield for next year.
That's fair. Yeah, speed would be an interesting thing to watch because he actually has the same sprint speed as Lawrence Butler, but he has just one steal on the season versus Butler, who we were just talking has like 15. He did have a knee sprain where he missed like 6 weeks last August. So I don't know if this year he's just kind of taking it easy. He has been caught 3 times next to the one steal, but again, he's ran a little bit in the past to where like 10 steals would go a long way, especially in this run environment compared to just being a goose egg more or less in that. So that would be something I'd be interested in monitoring. And if he shows an indication to run, I think it does a lot for his value. So that is Blade, Butler, and Rooker, the trio of athletics. We got some more names coming up, but we got to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. All right. So next group here, I know Steve, you kind of Nick Pollock-esque named the tier a little bit with the all or nothing bats, or is there more to see here with Matt Wallner and Eugenio Suarez? These are very on brand names for WAF because
I feel like
Wallner
we've
was a
talked about
guy.
Wallner all year.
Oh
Suarez
yeah,
has been,
Suarez since the origin of the show. Yeah, but Wallner we liked at the start of the year. He got sent down after a dreadful April with like a 50% K rate. Then he came back up. We talked about him on the kind of second half bold prediction show, and he has had a bold performance in the second half. 7th in WRC plus since All-Star break. The shocker is not the pop because you kind of expect that. But the 278 batting average is really what the shocker is. And that's with, per usual with Wallner, a K rate that's well over 30%. Granted, that's an improvement from the 50 that it was at in April. But yeah, when this guy actually doesn't play himself off the field with the strikeout rate, he really is like, Joey Gallo reincarnate with the level of power he brings. It's almost top 5 across the entire league. So talk to me about Wallner, Steve. It definitely is all or nothing. I think it's worth a shot late that this could kind of evolve into like a Kyle Schwarber type of deal. But the floor is very low because as we've seen, it's just not even playing with the big league club. So talk to me about Wallner, and then we'll get to Suarez, who's got a lot of interesting things to look at too.
The power is legit with Wallner. If you go to the Savant bat tracking and bat speed leaderboards, you just bump down the minimum because Wallner was down for most of the year. He is 5th in average bat speed. Behind Giancarlo Stanton, O'Neill Cruz, John Hensky Noel, which maybe that should have been named for this list. That's interesting. Kyle Schwarber and then Matt Wallner. And then in 6th is another guy who's pretty interesting, and I'm actually intrigued that he's on here. And that's Junior Caminero. So that's intriguing. That I know he hasn't had the greatest start or lit the world on fire since he's been called up. He's been fine holding his own, but I think there's and that's maybe a topic for another show. I think there's a bit to like with Junior Caminero. The barrel rate isn't there, but a 48% hard hit rate and elite bat speed is a nice toolbox to start with. But back to Wallner, it's crazy because as you can see on the YouTube screen, the K rate has completely gone down. It's like a steep, ski mountain down, but it went from like 55% when he was sent down in the beginning of the year to like 35% as far as like 15 game rolling average. In the second half, it's a 32% strikeout rate. So like, yeah, it's good that he's improved, but it's still pretty astronomical. And I don't know if Wallner is going to be able to sustain, a palatable batting average like he has in the second half when he's striking out that much. But I still think it's a Gallo profile without the steals. Like I think he's like could hit like 220 with like 40 homers or something like that in the full year because that's how good the power is. So I like Wallner a lot. There was a reason why we liked him in The preseason, I just don't know if he has enough contact skills to maintain the 260 average. But again, like he did it last year in 76 games, and he's batting 260 in 63 games this year. Maybe he just mashes enough that doesn't matter, and he can have a league average batting average with a 37% strikeout rate or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a 389 BABIP, but at the previous 2 seasons, 328, 367. So he kind of writes his own rules in terms of like what is sustainable and not. I think you just have to expect that he could be, a drop candidate in as
He could get
early
sent
as
down. He could get sent
mid-April.
down.
Right?
He
Yeah,
could
he
get sent
could.
down again. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've talked about it. I'm only curious in terms of like his hitting situation. Oh, okay. So he's arbitration eligible 2027. And then free agent 2030. Okay.
So yeah, he'll be with the Twins for a while.
I'll be with the Twins. Yep. And just 26 years old. So imagine if it's unimaginable, but if he could tap into even more power as he still kind of gets into what's the true power prime.
Mm-hmm.
Shift over to Eugenio Suarez, who of course is by the book past power prime. I think, it's been a joke on this show, Steve, because I was such a hard fade on Suarez a few seasons back. It was a call that kind of worked out because of the K rate and everything. There was a couple articles that I had put out. But so much of what he's doing this year resembles more of the Eugenio Suarez of like 2018, 2019, that it's really gotten my attention. That like, I thought the book was out on exactly who this player was. I thought he was going to age in a hurry and kind of evaporate from relevancy and everything, but 9th in WRC plus since All-Star break. And I think it's just that he's doing it in a different way. So the barrels are actually like coming down a little bit, which normally is a really bad thing, but like, it's like diminishing returns. He hits the ball hard regardless. So what is happening otherwise besides the barrels coming down a little bit? And the K rate has also come down to 26.5% on the season, which is the lowest since 2018. And then the pull rate, which is kind of a theme for the show a little bit, but the pull rate, if you look at his homer plot chart this year, it's all out to left field with a couple exceptions. And last year it was pretty equally distributed, like pole versus center. So again, it's just something that looks really intentional, and paired with the K rate, I kind of like what I'm seeing here for Suarez. Yes, he's 33, but I don't know. I think I'm back on board, and I think it's a name that people are so used to thinking they know what they got that there might be a little bit of a discount, even for as good as the D-backs were in the second half.
I wish I pulled up a leaderboard, but since 2017, there's probably only a handful of guys that have more homers than him in the league. I could maybe do that as you talk about one of your favorite players. But, 3 out of the last 4 years, he's going to have 30 homers if he hits 4 more homers this year. He had 22 last year with the 719 OPS. The year before that in Seattle, he had a 791 OPS, 132 WRC plus with 30 homers. Sure, yeah, I don't think you could bank on the average, and the 250 average on the year this year is probably a bit high, but 80 runs, 90 RBIs, 26 homers. I don't think there's been a player in the league that has more RBIs than him in the second half. I know that's situational and there's not much predictivity to that, but especially if he stays with Arizona, which I think he will, he has a club option for $11 million next year. I think they're going to pick that up without a doubt, considering how good he's been for them and how good that offense is. Like, that's great for fantasy, for his value. Like, this is a guy that would be a great value as like your first CI in 15 team deep leagues, or like a
total
parachute. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if he's your starting third baseman in a tough situation, but like, I think you could pretty much bank on him being like a 220 to 240, 30 homer guy with good counting stats and a good offense. Like, I don't see why there's a reason not to. He's cut the K rate. The hard hit rate has always been, above average. The max EVs are in line. Barrel rate, even though it's down, it's still 11%, so it's still good. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever get that 2018, 2019 back, but I think he's like the 2016, 2017, 30 homer, kind of a drain in batting average, but not too bad. He's carved out a great career, man.
He really
And
has.
he's been pretty good since that like write-off. Like, I know he hit like 198 that year, but it was still 31 homers and a 713 OPS. Like, it's not too bad.
Well, and
Considering.
nothing looks fluky with what he's
No.
done this season either. Like when you look at the BABIP, when you look at the home run to fly ball, the K rate, the pull rate, those tangible changes, and then like his pitcher list to X average is 242. So you're right that he's probably going to land somewhere around there, but honestly, you could do a whole lot worse with the power that he brings, and now, like you said, the counting stats with that offense. And who knows? I mean, if he's kind of going down the path of reinventing himself, like he is a professional's professional in terms of how long he's been in the league and everything. So I wouldn't put it past him, to continue to kind of redefine how he goes into like his final act of his career here. It's almost like obviously Votto's in a different air from anybody, but we've seen hitters that have survived in the league for a decade plus do some really interesting things and just get crafty. And I wouldn't put it past Suarez. And it looks like he's made an effort this year to be a bit different player. And it's been a really productive player in a different way. So I like Suarez. I like Wallner. Suarez safer for sure. And Wallner's kind of your best
upside.
ball shot.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of upside, the next group here, we're talking about the Jacksons, Churio and Jackson Merrill. And I'll start with Churio, Steve. 10th in the WRC plus since All-Star break. Before All-Star break, he was a 243 average, 678 OPS. People who paid steep prices on draft day were pretty disappointed. Some had moved on.
He was on waivers in 12-team leagues. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of those managers are probably saying that's what happened that caused all this change is they dropped him and he broke out. But since All-Star break, at 319 average, a 957 or 959 OPS. Now it looks really good when you just zoom out. 19 homers on the season, 20 steals on the season. He's ran more than that and gotten caught like 6 times. So that's, again, something that I like to see on the intent. And the tangible stuff under the hood, the barrel rate has just been a step ladder. From June, it was 3%, moved up to 7% in July, moved up to 11% in August, and now 14% from what we've seen in September. I mean, we're just seeing a 20-year-old come into his own. The line drive rates also look like a steep climb throughout the season. So, yeah, I mean, maybe there's some early career adjustments, that whole song and dance with pitchers adjusting to a new hitter and vice versa. But like, he's passed the test, and it really does look like he's here to stay. And at just 20 years old, man, it's like you're already starting to see that this could be kind of next up. Like maybe of every name we've talked about so far, just scrolling through, like Rooker is up there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Churio gets some juice to where he's going ahead of a Rooker.
I would think Churio goes ahead of Rooker just because of the steals, the youth, the prospect pedigree. Absolutely.
The hype. Yeah. Yep. And I don't know. I mean, to me, there's a cap because I never get too starry eyed at like paying for the youth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of grown into like assembling the old man squad and looking for value and stuff. But we see it every year that some of the guys who are on the doorstep, Ellie De La Cruz, things of that nature, they pop off. And you wouldn't be surprised if that was Churio next year. And I think the helium will kind of follow that narrative. But Steve, I'll turn it to you for Jackson Merrill, and then we should probably talk about both of these because yeah, it's a fun way to group them here for the Jacksons, and a lot to like with both of them.
Yeah, you can see Churio's barrel percentage just improvement over the months. Really, really impressive for a 20-year-old, right? I think in the majors, 20, is he 21 even yet? So props to him. It's just been an incredible year for both of them. And like, I think like there was a point early in the year where it's like, those rookie investments weren't really paying off, and now gave it some time, and it's been two of the best rookie seasons that we've seen. And we've seen some good ones recently. So maybe pays to have a little bit of patience, or add them when they've been dropped if you need to wait till rookies like Jackson Churio makes an adjustment, and then they could truly show off their talent. But Merrill, I think I like a little bit more. I may be in the minority on that, but he does everything really, really well. An 11.3% barrel rate on the year. The X stats all back up his projections. He chases and doesn't walk much, but like at age 21, that's got to be expected.
And a positive on the wall. As long as it's not a
Yeah,
points league, you're getting way more from that at batting average plus.
yeah. Like his batted ball profile, like the pull center oppo, the fly ball, ground ball, line drive ratio is all like in line. And his spray chart, man, it is a thing of beauty. I am pulling it up on YouTube right now. It is just absolutely gorgeous to look at. Like there are homers to dead center, to left, to right. The singles are sprayed all over the outfield. The doubles down the line. Like,
Yeah, hugging the line.
yeah. It's just he's just looks like a veteran hitter with unbelievable athleticism in a 21-year-old body that could grow into power, grow into speed. I think that there probably will be a lot of hype on Jackson Merrill next year, and I'm going to have a hard time passing it up and paying what probably is a pretty steep draft price. Like I think Merrill and Churio in the too early meatball draft that Rob DiPietro and Deadpool Hitter put together, I think they were like third or fourth round picks, fifth round picks, the latest. So the hype's going to be real on those guys. I'm sure it'll only get more expensive as we get into the off season and proper draft season for 2025.
Yeah, the line for Merrill: 23 homers, 16 steals, 287 average, 83 RBIs, 72 runs. And yeah, like you said, Steve, it's a really promising frame. Like he's got a few inches on Churio. Churio's a little bit faster, quite a bit faster actually, but Merrill still has the 16 steals. Caught 3 times on the season. So yeah, I mean, both of them, it's like they hit to all fields. They're 20, 21 years old. Like these are two guys that will be just very popular breakout picks to go from where they're already at to be like top 2 round type of guys. Like it feels like a Gunnar Henderson or, Ellie was kind of a different
that's been a
piece,
pretty
but
good investment the last few years, right?
Yeah, it has.
I know Carroll had, and we'll talk about him later. Spoiler alert. But it's been a pretty wise investment,
Yeah, no, you're right. And it does seem like the potential gain on that makes up for the ones that are seemingly misses, because the ones that seem to miss always find a way to at least have respectable seasons. Like you have to look pretty hard for somebody who's been like a top 100 player who just completely falls out of relevancy. But we'll talk about more of that after we take our second ad break. We'll be right back after this. So, Steve, it was the perfect tease there, but we got to talk about Corbin Carroll, which is a funny name to have on a kind of late season hitter standout, because, you would think a guy that was picked in the top 5 would not even have the qualifications to break out or to stand out. But Carroll was so bad in the first half of the year, and it just felt like it was an injury. It was a lost season. And then kind of did the Bichette thing from a couple years back where he's really saved his entire season for Roto. For head to head, people are still probably, wincing and everything. But in August alone, 11 homers, a 280 average, 1042 OPS. And yeah, now you look at the entire body of work, and it's still not necessarily what you signed up for, but 19 homers, 27 steals, the 230 average hurts. But we saw kind of the power binge that it's almost easy to doubt with a 5'10" frame and 165 pounds. But we've seen Carroll kind of leap back into that like upper echelon to where now it's really going to be interesting on what people do with him in draft season. Curious your thoughts under the hood. And also, do we think this is a early second rounder, mid second round? Like what happens with Carroll here? Because this is almost unprecedented.
I'm back in. I think it's, he was battling something. His shoulder wasn't fully right, and it just took time, and he's feeling good again. 46 games since the All-Star break, 261, 343, 591, 934 OPS, 14 homers, 9 stolen bases. The only players with more home runs plus stolen bases in the second half are Shohei Ohtani and Jose Ramirez. That's Corbin Carroll. That's why he was a top 5 pick, despite the shoulder concerns. Like, he is a unicorn profile. And it just looks like he is back. Like, the underlying numbers, the Bauer percentage, hard hit rate, K rate, walk rate, they're all now like in line with last year, right? Like, it's all slightly down. Sure, it was like a 7.5% Bauer rate to like a 6.9% Bauer rate, like 40% hard hit to like 38% hard hit. But when you factor in that he was literally like the meme was the Savant screenshot of just the ice cold Savant lollipops for him, and it just shows you how much Corbin Carroll has improved to get back to basically in line to what he was last year. Now, I know last year too there was some injury at the end of the year and the power sort of evaporated, but now it's been over a year since like that video right before the All-Star break where you saw him grabbing his shoulder, where we thought like his season was over in 2023. So I think it just took time, and I think Corbin Carroll's back. And if he's anything less than a mid-second round pick, I think it's going to be a great discount. Like, the only thing that stands out when you look at his like underlying numbers is the fact that he's a 253 BABIP. Is Corbin Carroll ever going to have a 253 BABIP again?
No.
Like, for the next 10 years? Like, I don't think so.
No, and he hit 285 last year. Do you have the BABIP from where he was at last year? With his speed, it's got to be like 300, right? At least league average, I would expect.
Last year, his BABIP was 325, so nothing extraordinary. But I mean, he's improved his strikeout and walk rate this year. The barrel rate and hard hit are right in line. Like I was saying, it's the max EV at a 111.5 was 114 last year, sure, but like, it looks like he's back. It looks like he's back.
This is one that it's like 2022 is really a cup of coffee. So it's really his sophomore season. It's like you see the sophomore slump happen, right? Like whether it's, I feel like Belly had it, it's narrative stuff, but you do feel like since Corbin Carroll went through a stretch where he was first half of the season, he hit 212 with a 635 OPS. You can't tell me that's not messing with the psyche of a 24-year-old who is almost an MVP the year prior. Yeah. So for him to come past that and, basically take the league by storm in August, you just have to imagine he's hitting the ground running next year. That's the hope. The only thing I'll note, and it really is just a note because, we're talking in September, 43 at bats, but has yet to homer in September, coming off of the 11 he had in August. So I'd like to see him get at least like 3 or 4 and not put up a goose egg or something. Otherwise, it does feel like he's going to be.
I also think it's pretty fair to expect, 4 to 5 homers a month from Carroll. I mean, and then the fact that he had 11 in August is crazy, but still, that's probably, I think he would pace for, in a good year, the 25 to 30 homers that he had last year,
Yeah, I think that's fair. Last year it was pretty spread out as well. Had a big June
And
with
I
8.
know
Yeah.
the steal totals are down, like the 27 to the 54 last year,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to consider the fact that he was just in a total, like, he wasn't on base. He was like, how is he going to worry about stealing bases
Right.
when in the first half when he was just like not a shell of himself, you know?
Yeah,
So
they
I
don't
don't
get
hold that against Corbin Carroll.
no, and they don't get faster
Yeah.
than Carroll. So I think he will be a great. He's already a reason why I would love to have like a pick around the turn, Steve, because
Yeah.
like I
You
think
would
I'm
take him
all
early
about.
round two? You would take him early round two?
Yeah, if I had like the 11th or 12th pick, or
And then,
certainly in a
yeah,
15 team, like as my second rounder early on there,
like your 16th pick. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I like it
Or the
just
16th overall
because.
pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, to me, that you're not paying for what he did this year by any stretch.
Yeah.
You're hoping that even if he splits the difference between last year and this year, that's
Yeah. It's
like
still pretty damn
25
good.
and 40 steals and
Yeah.
260. It's like that's
Yeah.
pretty dang good, and it could be way bigger than that. He was a name we were throwing out that could have had a Bobby Witt type of season, who we're saying is like consensus 1 or 2. So
Sure.
yeah, love it for Carroll. Uh, Wrapping up with Tyler Fitzgerald, Steve, which is one that we talked about. I added in the home league. I think he might have got scooped up before we chatted about him early on in WAF. And he broke out and just kind of didn't stop. He did slow down a little bit, but 15th WRC plus since All-Star break. Um, I know we had a little bit of interesting chatter on this because you were kind of mentioning that there wasn't a ton that you could point to like some of these other guys. The only thing that I saw for Fitzgerald, because now his body work is a 294 average, 877 OPS, 14 homers, and the 17 steals is what's really exciting. All that, the 14 homers, 17 steals, that's in 83 games. So really profiling, or pro rating, I should say, out to be like a 25-30 guy or somewhere in that ballpark. And then the average at 294, it's just like, it all looks like, MVP caliber, which I don't think we can expect, especially with that ballpark. It's not exciting. I know he was a name that didn't have like an immense prospect pedigree when he came up. But he is very fast. And the one thing that stood out to me is that the pull rate, which is where all his homers on the spray charts all go straight to left, his pull rate was 50%, which if he was qualified would have been 10th in the majors. So it's kind of like what we were talking about for Brent Rooker, that, guys who have a lot of intentionality like that sometimes can have more results than you would think from kind of the sliders and the kind of the traditional underlying metrics. So I'm kind of in between on Fitzgerald, even from rostering him. I don't know that I'm like, going to be setting the min pick on him. But I'm interested, especially with the 99th percentile sprint speed. Talk to me about Fitzgerald. Do you feel like you're going to have any interest in the offseason?
I don't, other than the fact that maybe I just should, just because the results have been so good. The player behind Carroll, Otani, and J Ram for homers plus steals since the All-Star break is Tyler Fitzgerald in fourth. He has 22 homers plus steals since the All-Star break. So crazy numbers that he's put up in a small sample, but the underlying metrics just are kind of middling. It's a 7.8% barrel rate, a 31% hard hit rate. The strikeout rate isn't good. So like, he does have the pull aspect, but I don't think he has the raw power or close to the raw power that Brent Rooker has. I know guys like Marcus Semien do that, but Marcus Semien has a much better, bat the ball skills. Never really has been a guy that strikes out close to 30% or have a 30% whiff rate. So I don't really know. Like, I find it and maybe it's a flaw in my game, but like I very much gloss over these types of players um, despite their results. So I don't know. I traded him in a league where I probably shouldn't have. about 2 months ago. Just thinking it was a heater that he came up on, and that proved to be a mistake. But I don't know. I just don't see how this profile has put together 14 home runs, an 877 OPS in 289 plate appearances with, a hard hit rate that's in the bottom 20th percentile of the league, and a barrel rate that's, slightly worse than league average.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I like the ballpark and the team context. It just scares me because, like, how many times have we been kind of tricked or disappointed in Giants that put together hot stretches, whether names in the past, like a Yastrzemski probably went on a run that people were wondering, is it legit and everything. A couple things just to play devil's advocate. The line drive rate, 70th percentile. His flare plus burner, which is great for average, 88th percentile. So he does have some sneaky stuff.
Yeah, he's got some average
speed.
skills. He's got some average skills despite the 30% strikeout rate, right?
Yeah, and even like the fly ball rate is 87th percentile, which I know you kind of double back on that, and you're like, well, if they're not hard hit fly balls,
but
then
if they're pulled,
that's an issue. But if they're pulled, and
right.
that's, I could see where he's going to have kind of a big range and possibly like an early ADP and a guy that can like slip in draft rooms because it's just, yeah, like you said, it's not the hard hit, it's not the barrel rate, and it's the hard contact is bad. You know what I mean? Like it's like 322nd in the league bad on pitcher list. My question is, was there ever any pop, which we can go over because it's been a minute since I've looked at his minor profile. But I just want to peek if Fitzgerald had any of this like pull power.
Yeah, he had 20 homers and 29 steals in 102 games in AAA last year. Had 2 more homers and 3 more steals in 19 games at AA. So had a 22-32 season.
I mean, in 2021, 2022,
20 games.
3 years in a row, he was pretty much like 25-30 homer pace in the minors. Yeah. He could be a little bit of a unicorn, like you said.
There might be something to this. The results don't lie. I mean, I know we, especially on this show and just the way our process works, we like to look underneath the hood to see what's real or not. But
that's where everyone else stops.
The crowd. Yeah.
That's where everyone else stops, and it's like if
this would be like a Nando DeFino like gut call guy, right? Like minor league, Milb hunting, like, look at this guy that's hit 20 homers and 20 steals every year in the minors. Like, why he's good. Like, who cares that his hard hit rate is 320th and on pitcher list.
He hits homers. He knows how to hit homers, and to me, I just don't think you can overlook the fact that like he is a demon on the base paths. Like it is 17 steals in 83 games, 99th percentile sprint speed. So his sprint speed is, I mean, it's at least from this year, it's above Corbin Carroll. Like where's Ellie? Yeah, he is 0.1 below Ellie's sprint.
Yeah, he's one of the fastest guys in the league. I
feel like you don't think about that because I don't know if it's just because he's got this like kind of vanilla name on like just Tyler Fitzgerald and he's on the Giants. Like there's not.
Seems like a guy that's like comes up in a, when you're in the fourth year of your college football dynasty on NCAA football.
Like the random name generator.
The 4-star quarterback you're trying to recruit,
All right, Steve, in the spirit of the show, this is why we do these. I think I'm going to say I am a Tyler Fitzgerald offseason backer here because I think that I think the speed, I think if he can just get me like close to 20 homers and then it's like 35 steal upside and the hit tool with the line drive rate and the polls, all that. I think that he could be overlooked. He might be kind of, how did Lane Thomas finish? Because Lane Thomas is one that everyone is kind of out on. He did not finish well, did he? I thought he was off to a good start. 32
He was
steals.
off to a good start, yeah.
11 homers, 32 steals.
I mean, it's useful in fantasy,
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, yeah, that's
You
any
gotta
closing
make sure that
thoughts
you
here?
take Tyler Fitzgerald in the pitcherless mock that we signed up for the
Absolutely. So I
offseason
can fight with
and
Nick.
fight
Yeah.
with Nick over him. Yeah.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
This is starting to get, like the routine that keeps on giving for us. But yeah, I'm in routine mode, Steve, because my hopes and dreams have already crashed, but you are still at the top of the mountain. So
Yeah.
rest up,
We're
shoot
trying to
me
get there.
text throughout it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted. Yeah.
And for the listeners, we'll still be on weekly through the end of the regular season, and then we switch to
Yep.
every other week in the off season. But yeah, that rounds us out. Any closing thoughts, Steve?
Thanks for listening, guys. We should have plugged this in the beginning of the show when everyone was listening, but follow us on YouTube. We're getting a lot more video content out there. Our live streams will be for the most part on Wednesday nights. That may change a bit in the off season just because it's every other week show. We may have some random days that we record, but we'll tweet out when we're going live. So we want to get some viewership there. You can interact, get some questions going and everything like that. So be sure to follow Wins Above Pod on YouTube. There'll be a lot of content that you can see on Twitter and stuff. Some new video clips. They're pretty cool. That'll be going out. So exciting stuff. I'm next week when we talk, I'm still going to be in the thick of this playoff race just because our matchups are 2 weeks. So got a long way to go, but hoping to hold on and finish strong here.
Yeah, I'm pulling for you, man. And for everyone still tuning in, pulling for you guys if you're still in the thick of it. But yeah, by all means, give us the follow on YouTube. Reach out this time of year. Piece of cake to work in any topics or questions you guys want us to cover. On Twitter at Wins Above Pod. I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818. That wraps us up for episode 155. Late season hitter standouts. Thanks for talking baseball with us, guys.
Thanks for listening, guys. Good luck down the stretch.